human resources, human capital, people and culture. This single vocation has many names. HR professionals are responsible for what is arguably the most critical success factor within any organization. It's talent. HR Studio Podcast brings you interviews from HR and industry thought leaders so you can listen, learn and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates. To learn more about our sponsor, please visit ajoconnor.com and be sure to check out the AJO blog for additional HR learning tools and resources.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HR Studio Podcast. I am thrilled to have, for the second time, if you refer back to episode 2, Dr. Bill Schiemann spoke about adding value, and especially with HR practitioners and leaders. We're excited to have Dr. Schiemann back again today because at the end of that episode, Bill, you talked about a book that you had coming out, and we're here already today. It feels like yesterday, titled Fulfilled, Critical Choices, Work, Home, Life. We wanted to go into deep detail about particularly how fulfilled can make someone's life more meaningful, and in particular with HR practitioners, HR leaders. So, Bill, how I want to start today is just by saying thank you for coming back. And how did you come up with this concept, and how would you define fulfilled?
Yeah, I'm delighted to be back. And what episode is this now? We started with number 2. That's I feel like I was on the ground floor here.
Yeah, we're over 40 now.
Wow. Okay. So the whole thing really started with work we've been doing for years on employee engagement and looking at what was that magic that happened when employees in the organization connected. And we've all seen that big pop, when it just works so well. And we've seen cases where it hasn't worked so well as additionally. And I had a client, we'd been working on a transformation project over 2 years, and it was very successful. And the leader of HR came up to me after we presented at conference board, and she said, I just want to let you know, I just was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Oh, wow. And
I'm, they're giving me 6 to 8 months if I'm lucky. And you provided some support, and I watched her through the process. And it's a story I opened the book with. And the short story to it is that through a whole series of very interesting actions, she actually survived.
Wow.
And it's a great story. And we're sitting in a cafe on the Upper West Side of New York a couple of years later, and she said, I want to thank you for saving me my life.
Wow, that's deep.
And I'm sitting across coffee with her saying, what are you talking about? And she said, it was the techniques that you had done in our business environment that I said, why couldn't I apply those to my personal survival goal at first, and then to think about broadly about where I'm going in life and the meaning of my work that I was doing and so forth. And as we talked, it set up some research in place with our Metrus Institute, which is our not-for-profit research arm that we've had, that part of our business. And we started doing research on the whole individual, saying what happens as part of someone's life goals, life fulfillment, to what happens when that intersects with the organization, and when does it go well and when does it not go so well? What are the things that work is connected to that are really bringing fulfillment in life, and what's not? And that 5 years of research included many interviews and surveys and of people who were both successful and not so successful in their life. And many of the successful people were also not very fulfilled. Now, we talk about, describe fulfillment as this sense of being all you can be, of achieving inner peace and long-term happiness. Not just happiness is often talked about day to day, but this is long-term fulfillment and feeling of that happiness and achieving life goals. And so that research was really the beginning of of the work that got us started in this space.
Wow, it's great. I love the fact that someone like yourself, that I would say you're definitely more cerebral because you have that deep-seated research, which is essential in the business world, I think. But you're able to take this practice from the business world and kind of cross over to personal development, and vice versa, because it's usually the two usually don't play in spaces similar like that. But to tell a story where you save someone's life is, I mean, that is going to penetrate through corporate world walls, I would say. That's great. So Bill, you talked a little bit about your finding with the research. Could you go a little bit deeper into what some of your findings were with this research?
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of shocked us was, this didn't shock me as much. 99% of people talk about becoming fulfilled in one form or another. And then we had to dig deeper. What does that mean? Is fulfillment tied to career success, career fulfillment, achieving your career dreams? Is it tied more to home? Is it tied to spirituality, religion? What is it tied to? And we found is for most people, over 90%, it was either career and work, number one, and family and relationships, two, or vice versa. They, both of them were important for most people, and other aspects fit into their life to support that. And what was shocking, though, was only 20% of the people we talked to were really highly fulfilled. So 80% of the people here at various age groups really having a sense of missing something, not being as fulfilled as they could be. And, as we talk to people, particularly those who were over 50 or so, longer work life, longer relationships experience in their life, we looked at the things what made a difference between those who said they were really highly fulfilled and those that weren't. And so the research that we did began to identify a set of what we would call science. So the part of the book is focused on what are things everybody could do that seems to work. So there were aspects such as planning and visioning, having a vision. A lot of people have a fairly fuzzy vision, but the people who were most fulfilled had a clear vision of what they wanted to do. And while we didn't expect people to have as clear visions in their teens or 20s, we expected that to crystallize. And those for whom it did, much better. To have clear goals, to have stepping stones, to measure what you do, and know that you're making progress. Those were some of the science parts of this that there's a lot of research behind. And then the other part was the art, and I'd call it the street smarts. What did people learn over time as they moved through life that enabled them to complement the science part, those science steps, to achieve fulfillment? And we discovered, 10 different areas in the book that we talk about that are part of the art. And nobody necessarily used all 10, maybe a few, but people used 3 or 4 of them, particularly to their advantage.
Excellent. Could you go into a couple of those? Just maybe like 2 or 3 that really stand out? I'm sure they're all equally balanced, but just so our audience could get an idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big one was we're in a world today that's not slowing down. We just did a corporate program for a law firm last week, part of a 2 half-day program that we do. And to a T, everyone in that room is feeling challenges around stress, work-life balance, or as we like to think about it today more as work-life integration, because there's no sort of, for most people start at 9 and all of a sudden the business is over at 5 o'clock. Building resilience was one of the key features. How do we become more resilient? How do we develop capabilities to manage our bounce back? So we found that in our work, 80% of people have had over 40 have had a major setback in their life.
Okay.
Could have been the cancer, could be sudden job loss, could be a divorce, whatever it is. Some people were able to bounce back much more quickly, other people very slowly, and some not at all. And that resilience is one of those things, one of the art areas that becomes particularly important today. Another one was the issue of priorities and time management. So that's another one that people use effectively to create alignment. What are my really important things I need to do and want to make time for? Do I have that? Do I make that time to get to the gym 5 days a week or whatever my goal is regarding my health? Or do I find excuses not do it, let other parts of my demands creep in, and then, later on I'm at the stage of a heart attack wondering like what happened. Yeah. So, I think those are some of the elements. It was attention to health. It was continuous learning to stay relevant today, which I think was a big one, not being become outdated in our skills and capabilities. And resilience was a big one.
That's great. Yeah, resilience is definitely a game changer. Once you get that down, you could bounce back from anything. It's important. So to talk more tactically about the chaos of today's working environment, what realistically could be done to kind of make this a tactical thing to apply some of these strategies, would you say?
Well, I think, let me come back to, one is what you do yourself, right?
Okay.
And it's starting to, only you can determine the vision for you, and only you can determine the priorities. So, we have an example in the book of, I'd like to become someday a judge in the circuit court. Well, if you're going to school today, there are some very clear steps that are required to get there. You need to go to law school. You need to get certain grades to get into law school. You need to, apprentice. There's a various things you do. And that's true of any profession. If I want to be a master welder, the things I need to do to get to that outcome. So those are kind of your own internal things. But then there's the organizational side. So human resources in particular is a function in a special role, really, to help the organization create this match between individuals and organization, where we get that pop I talked about at the beginning. How do we create that high engagement? How do we leverage people's passion? And we found three things that really make a difference. One is alignment. Do we hire people who are capable of being aligned in our environment and really engaged in the kind of culture we have? Now, more often, the turnover we're seeing today is tied to fit issues rather than competencies or skills.
Okay.
Pretty good at hiring for skills. Development. Are we helping employees develop their skills in a way that is not only meaningful to the company, but also meaningful to them? And that's particularly true today, I think, of millennials who are, earlier stage in their career. Are we providing training that they say, this is going nowhere in terms of my life and what I want to do.
Right. And
they go to it and they come back and when, they forget 90% of the training. Or is it something that they see as part of their life path? And how do we engage them as part of the performance management process? How do their managers engage them to do that? And then third is the engagement side. Are we leveraging things people have a passion for? Or they see this just as a passing thing in their life till they get to something important? Are we giving them opportunities to grow? Are we recognizing and rewarding them and creating that great sense of accomplishment that tends to engage people much more? So I think managers and the policies that HR and the systems that HR creates can make or break whether that happens or not.
That's great. Back to ACE again. That's what we talked about last interview. It's really important to have that. So we talk a little bit, applying this concept to really HR leaders. How could a couple examples, probably what you've seen out there, how could HR leaders kind of embed this in their culture or their conversations for developing someone? What do you see out there for people talking about fulfillment in the workplace?
Yeah, and I think, and I'll just go back to the ACE comment for a minute, the alignment, capabilities, engagement. And I think, all of our research over the years where we're looking at strategy on down to what individuals do, that's where we really discovered the power of ACE. And last year, one of our clients, Jack in the Box, won the HRM Excellence Award.
Oh, wow.
And part of what they were able to do is go into their restaurants, and by knowing employees' scores on alignment, capability, engagement, they're literally able to predict their revenue, their profit, their guest complaints, their guest satisfaction, their average spend, and turnover.
Wow.
So if you go into high ACE restaurants, managers who could create a high ACE environment, they had one half the turnover of restaurants that were low in ACE. So I think that brings me back to the manager is really a critical component.
Okay.
How do, those restaurants that were high ACE restaurants tended to have managers who knew their people more holistically.
Right.
They understood what these people were doing, who had childcare, who had elder care, who was going to school, and how do I blend this mix of talent? Because let's face it, we're all given some blend and mix of talent out there. I think the great managers put it together in a unique and powerful way to drive their business goals. And that's what these managers did. I think the weak managers tended to be the one size fits all. I'll be fair to everyone.
Okay.
No one gets Fridays off. Nobody does this. Everyone does this. And in doing that, they ended up engaging no one or engaging them at a much lower level. So I think managerial training and development and how managers not only set goals, but the performance conversations today, not just an annual review, but ongoing conversations and attending to something that always gets low ratings on our employee surveys. We do lots and lots of employee surveys, is development. And most employees, I'd say 60% walk away saying that the performance review did not help them grow their performance in the following cycle. And more of them say that they really don't have enhanced development plans as a result of it, or there's no follow through. So people might say, I was told I would get this training or I could do this kind of training, but next year we didn't have any time for the training. So I think that's one. And I think the second one is our policies.
Okay.
So if we have restrictive policies that say there's no flexibility in the workplace, people can't work to their energy, to their to what works with the rest of their lives, we tend to constrict the potential that's there in employee contributions. And a good example of that is a company that we did a executive breakfast at a few weeks ago called Commvault in New Jersey. And they have given their employees a good deal of free rein to work, come in hours, leave in hours that make sense, that fit their schedule, their needs, their energy. But you must get the work done.
Okay.
So we're going to measure you on the work, not on time. And they're coming in and talking to their employees about that balance. Weekends, you need to have some recharge time. So sending out emails constantly is great, but people shouldn't be expected to respond to them on a weekend or downtime, and it shouldn't be something held against you. So they're trying to reduce some of that stretch in the rubber band. We talk about resilience. Part of it's what are our policies that help create that stretch or release of that rubber band, and then back to the individual. What are you doing that gives you more resilience?
Excellent. That's great examples. Thanks for sharing those.
Sure.
That's really two things that come out of that explanation you just gave. One, the fact that you can measure ACE, talking about HR and ROI, that's a game changer. It really is. And then the second is, it's nice to see that some of these organizations are creating a safe structure for people to really perform on metrics that really matter, like productivity versus, how many hours are spent in an office. So it's really cool. So Bill, to wrap up today, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
How about our HR leaders that are listening to this? What advice would you recommend for them to live a fulfilled life at work, but also in their personal lives as well?
Yeah, I think one would be intentional.
Okay.
I think it's a big one. And in fact, it was funny at the end of our workshop last week with the law firm, one of the partners came up to me and she said, I kind of came into this. I'm harried. I'm busy, stressed out. Last thing I have is time to take 3 hours and go to a workshop. And she said, this was profound and affecting my life. And what I'm going to go do is go back to the wall, back in my office, and I'm going to write "Be intentional" on the wall.
Okay.
It is, I need to make sure what I'm doing is what I'm really is important, that I've made priorities, that I've made choices, that I don't try to do it all, but I try to do what's important right and do it well. And I think the second one is provide resources to enable your managers to get the skills to be able to do the things I talked about, to be able to understand that they don't have to worry by just, one size fits all kinds of approaches to people, but they need to help. HR can help these managers mass customize what they're doing to different people, to the needs of different individuals. And in doing that, that's where they're going to leverage this potential that they have in the workforce.
Excellent. Love it. This is great. I'm excited to kind of apply some of these strategies because it's so imperative that we do this in order to stay energized and to not burn out, really. If you want to live a healthy, productive life and leave a legacy, you need to live fulfilled. So thank you for this, Bill. Bill, last but not least, where can people reach out to you or follow you? Where can people get the book? What would you like to throw out there to the audience?
Sure. And the book is Fulfilled Critical Choices, Work, Home, Life. You can get it on Amazon.
Excellent.
And we have a brand new Audible version of the book. So you have a chance to, on your drives to and from work or wherever to hear it. And also people can follow me on at LinkedIn or at W. Schiemann on Twitter. And we have a website for Fulfilled, a Facebook page where you could share stories, and we put up the latest information on fulfillment at that site.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill, for all that. That's great. And we'll have this all linked up in our show notes as well for everyone. So if they don't have a pen and paper or they're driving, we'll make sure they get that. Bill, thanks again for being on our probably episode 40 plus. So thank you for being on this again, and look forward to continuing the conversation with the Fulfilled Life.
That's great. Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you for listening to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. To download the show notes and discover additional information from this week's episode, please visit hrstudiopodcast.com. To join the conversation, we invite you to visit our LinkedIn group, where you will connect with a growing community of current and future HR leaders.